Hey up and welcome to the Temple of Blair. This is a conversation with ex-Roadrunner head of sales Michael Canter. Big apologies on this one because it was recorded something like November last year and I've only just got around to editing it. Sorry, Michael. Michael has a very storied career in the music industry and he obviously shares that in this conversation. He's now in the wonderful world of real estate, so towards the end we start banging on about houses and things like that. Anyway, let's get into it. 1, 2, fuck shit up. As I say, I edited this meticulously, and I sent a bunch of questions, but really those kind of like, that's kind of where my headspace is when I think of yourself. And I spoke to Jim Salaby, who was like head of sales. I don't know if he was your immediate predecessor or yeah. So I've got this idea of like the sales function, but it mostly links in with Red and IRD. And obviously what would become like the IDJ functionality and things like that. So there's always like knowledge gaps for me to fill, but the questions kind of are more pertinent to, well, how can we, how's my mind wandering throughout the chronology of your career? And then we can just sort of go off and left and right and do whatever you want, really.
Sure.
But straight out of the gate, though, I like to ask, like, what's your gut feeling in your gut, the words that fly into your head when you think about Roadrunner? Because obviously it will have been a while since you last worked there, and I think from speaking to other people, everyone seems to remember it with a lot of reverence, especially considering where Roadrunner is and where they are now. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, no, it was to me just an amazing time, amazing label that was, one of the few branded labels. And I was so thrilled and happy to be part of it. It was just, it was a time and a place that just, had the credibility of the streets, and then to have, multi-platinum records, whether it's a Nickelback on the pop side, but to have Slipknot achieve the success that Slipknot did was just amazing. So for me to be part of it was just really special.
Yeah. It's always interesting to hear the participants' reflections on it, because my role in the UK is the UK has a very special bond with Roadrunner UK, because something about the way they administered like the brand was unavoidable. Like every time you went to a gig, the street team was always outside, and obviously the roster itself was really strong. And it was that's kind of how I got into this, because I was like, there's got to be something there. This can't have been by accident. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how it's all sort of like got to this point where everyone's sort of got this weird relationship with that little red logo, and everyone seems to remember it with a lot of reverence. And no one's done a book or a documentary on it, which feels like a knowledge gap to me, a substantial one.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was very lucky because I came from Big Beat, right? Big Beat / Atlantic. Big Beat was kind of what Roadrunner was a little bit, but on the hip hop and R&B side.
Right.
Big Beat was very branded, right? It had the streets, like, and they were like, oh, what's the next Big Beat release? What's the next single? Successes were Robin S., Show Me Love. That was such a big record. Craze the Party. And then we signed Junior Mafia, which consisted of Notorious B.I.G., right? So he was blowing up, on Def Jam. And then we had Lil' Kim came out of that. So I was really lucky because I knew, how much a branded label, it just helps, especially if you're starting from scratch, to really build a base, because, you have that brand already, and the streets are like, okay, what's the next thing coming out on Roadrunner? Oh, it's a Big Beat artist. So I was very lucky to come from one branded situation right into another.
I think it's interesting. I think one thing that could be quite valuable is using the term branded label. That's not something I've heard before. I understand the meaning, but if we were to try and assign a threshold to what makes a branded label, what would you say it is? Is it just the cultural significance, or is there mechanics involved?
Wait, hold on. Let me just back up. I'm sorry. Notorious B.I.G. wasn't on Def Jam. Actually, I think he was on P. Diddy's label.
Right. Okay.
Right. So I want to clear that up. Sorry, everybody.
Wait a second. I've watched Define Ones recently. What was it? East Coast was. What was Biggie's label? Not Biggie, sorry. P. Diddy's label.
It was through Clive. Is what is it? It was through Clive Davis's Bad Boy. He was on Bad Boy.
That's it. Yeah. Our street credibility just fucking went down. Let's define a branded label. Let's just sort of like spitball what we mean by that? Because I think it's meaningful.
Really, I just think, perception from the street, that really, to me, in a nutshell, it's like, the label, the kids know, the consumers know something coming out on Roadrunner is going to be credible and it's going to be good.
Yeah.
What level it achieves, no one knows, but it is going to be a really good start and a good foundation. So
Yeah.
it's really perception, and especially when you're trying to break new artists. Listen, if Slipknot came out on Roadrunner, right? If it would have come out on Atlantic, I don't know. Would it have had the same success? Who knows, right? Cream rises to the top. You don't know. But on Slipknot, for example, we gave it such a base, such credibility, right? I mean, we were typically on Roadrunner, like for baby bands, let's call it baby bands, we would ship maybe anywhere from like 8 to 12,000, which is actually pretty good, right? And really with not much of a story, just it's kind of like, hey, we're going to rock radio, college radio, we're doing promos, we're getting it to the DJs. With Slipknot, not only did we have the brand of the label behind it, but we had that buzz and that credibility. We shipped 30,000, which with no radio, no nothing. And that was just, all the stars aligned, credible label, credible act. And it was just
Ozfest 99. The whole thing. Yeah, I think that's kind of the point of this in the whole project. It's sort of going, we understand the branded label being the perception. We understand there's this sort of culture, there's this kind of walled garden. Products coming out of this walled garden, and we, as in consumers, understand something viable is going on. But this is where vocabulary fails, because when you start asking the hows and the whys, you don't really know. And I just think it's something that's beyond they just succeeded and had good bands. There's something else underpinning that as well, which creates that kind of perception. And again, I think that's just where vocabulary fails us. I've been trying to answer that, I don't know, concisely for 2 years, but I think you can't answer that in a sentence. You have to go, there's a Dutch guy, there's Monty, there's other like 15 black t-shirt clad people doing different things. And it just created a soup. And there's
branded, let's say branded is the perception, right, from the street. But the mechanics behind it, obviously, you had this talented group of people that are just, live, breathe, sleep, Roadrunner and the bands and the culture, I mean, I was like a little bit of an outsider, no tats, no piercings, but I got it. You know what I mean? Was I stronger really with probably, hip hop and R&B? Yes. But I was a sales guy and I got it. So, you give me a story, you give me the tools, and then I'm going to help, get it to that next level. And so you had really such talented people, some who you've spoken to, some who you're going to speak to. And a lot of these people have gone on to, huge success, huge success.
Yeah, the cross-pollination since 2012 is crazy. Crazy just what people are doing now. Well, let's go. Let's deal this chronologically then. So how did you get into music? Because I found conflicting accounts. One was you had a history in distribution, and another one saying you had your own label or something like that.
Yeah, so college days, back in the 80s, I did start a rap label, right?
Sweet.
It was called Def City Records.
Ah, okay.
So a little bit of a bite off of Def Jam, but it was called Def City Records.
Right.
And I started putting out hip hop records. I didn't know what I was doing. I had a little bit of money. It's funny, like this one group that comes to mind, MC Sugar Ray and Stranger D. Actually, so with that record in particular, right? So, again, it was just strictly vinyl, right? Going to record stores and learning the whole roles of everything. So with that record, Eddie O'Loughlin at Next Plateau, who had a very successful hip hop label, right? Salt and Pepper, Kid and Play, Sybil, everybody.
Roadrunner alumni as well.
He got wind of my rap record buzzing, right? So he wanted to meet with me. So I meet with him, with the group, and he's like, great, I want to do a singles deal with you. I think he offered us maybe like $2,500, right? And the group was thrilled. Okay. And I was thrilled. I'm like, this is great. We're going to the next level.
And you're still in college?
Yep, still in college. So couple days later, as the music industry would happen, I get a call from Eddie O, or maybe his assistant, whatever, and they're saying, you know what, the record's starting to die out. We're no longer going to give you a deal, right? Now, as a young college student, and I'm dealing with, this hip hop artist, like this is their life. Like this is like, wait a minute, we had a deal, all of a sudden we don't have a deal. So they were definitely not happy. I was not happy. My attorney, he didn't know what to say. So I was like, listen, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I'm just going to go to Next Plateau, and I want to get, no appointment. I want to go see Eddie O'Loughlin. So I went there, no appointment, just waited to see him. Luckily enough, he saw me, and I said, Eddie, please, like, you got to do this record. He goes, it's kind of over, this and that. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the record, no advance. Just put it out, So he goes, you remind me of myself when I was your age. He goes, I'll tell you what, I'll do the record. Of course, I was like, can we do the advance? He was like, no. He goes, but I'll pick up the record. I'll have Mark the 45 King do a remix. Mark the 45 King, if you look him up, he's like, was the hottest producer. He did Hard Knock Life for Jay-Z, like the hottest producer. So we'll put a new remix on the record and we'll put it out. So, that was fantastic. I mean, the record, whatever, it was on Next Plateau. It sold a little bit. They didn't pick up the option. But now I had a good relationship with Next Plateau and put out a few records, and, I didn't have the funding for Def City and I didn't really know what I was doing. So it kind of went on the wayside, right? So during that time also, this is going to ruin my credibility, I was also a freestyle dance artist.
Sweet.
Okay. I was signed to Micmac Records, which was the hottest freestyle label back in the day. Had, Johnny O and Cynthia, Two Without Hats. Like, if you lived in the New York area or Florida, you heard about Micmac, and they were also a branded label. Like anything coming out on Micmac, you got to pick it up, you got to pick it up, you got to pick it up. So I went under the name Mikey, right? And then I also had another deal on another label called Metropolitan under Michael Christopher. So I was just trying to, like, I wanted to be an artist. I just wanted to make it any way I could. So around this time, I wanted to make it in the music business if I couldn't do it as an artist or whatever. So my brother, Alan, who's 10 years older than me, he had worked for Warner Home Video, part of the Warner system. And he's like, listen, if you want to get in, you got to just meet people. And he introduced me to his friends, Mike Carden and Nick Maria, who were heads of sales for Atlantic Records, right? So he said, always stay in touch with these guys. And I bonded with Mike Carden, who was, second in charge of Atlantic. So Mike got me the job at Pearl Music. Pearl Music was a one-stop in Brooklyn, right? And putting out, like a lot of hip hop, dance, no real.
Have we hit the 90s yet?
We are end of the 80s. Like we're kind of upper 80s.
Okay.
Maybe 80, 87, 80. No, I'm sorry. We were probably 89, 90. Okay.
Yeah.
So 89, 90. So anyway, it was so great. Here's another disappointment. I'm at Pearl One Stop. I know my record is coming out on Micmac. I'm like, this is awesome, right? And we didn't get it in stock. I mean, I was in charge of buying too. I was doing sales and buying. I must have ordered like 500, which was a lot. Told the owner, and I'm like, listen, where's this record? She goes, let me call Marvin Schlachter, the owner of Micmac. And she comes back to me. She goes, they really are doing a very light release on it. Actually, it's just like it's supposed to be just a promo. And I'm like, oh, but we can bring it in. Like they weren't even going to press it up. And this is when I really learned, because what was happening was I was signed to these producers where Micmac was doing all their recordings in their studio. So they just threw my producers a bone and said, yeah, we'll sign your kid, whatever. It was never supposed to come out, whatever.
Right.
So I'm probably giving you too much detail.
No, it's cool. I love it.
I worked at Pearl One Stop, doing mainly sales, calling up, record stores, whatever. I did that for a couple years. And, there were some really good people there that I met through, Jim Mahoney, who he'll come up later in my story. He ended up at Roadrunner in a certain capacity.
Yep.
Mitch Dudley, who ended up at Red Distribution. So it's interesting along the way how people, you know, elevate and come along. So anyway, so I am, you know, I get a call from Mike Carden from Atlantic, and he's like, hey, Craig Kalman just got a deal. He owns Big Beat Records. He just got a deal, and Atlantic is buying half of his label, and he needs a head of sales. I'm recommending you for it. I'm
wow.
like, awesome. This is great. Right?
Right.
So I go in, I meet Craig, you know, he's my age, whatever. While I'm there, I find out that one of his releases is MC Sugar Ray and Stranger D, right? The record that I had put out. So that was like a bonding thing, right? Although they might have changed their name at the time, whatever. So anyway, it's like, you know, we had a great conversation, and he's like, listen, you don't have national experience, but I like you, and you come well, you know, you're recommended from top guys, whatever, and he gave me the job, right? So in hindsight, right, why do you think he hired me? He was no dummy. When the heads of Atlantic sales, who are going to oversee Big Beat sales, put their guy in there, it's such a win-win, right? I didn't realize that at the time. So it doesn't matter to me. I was in there, and it was a great situation. And then that's where Big Beat just really, just again, like a Roadrunner, but on the hip hop and R&B side, just, you know, like we really had hit after hit after hit. Big Beat, so it was, you know, I'll get to the Roadrunner structure. So at Big Beat, you know, I was tapped into, we had distribution, and I was tapped into the Atlantic regionals. Right. So I know you had previous conversations with Kathy and Austin, and, you know, the structure really is the same. So there were 4 regionals. I was tapping into those regionals. Now, Big Beat was a little guy in a big ship, right? So they paid attention to us when we had the big records and the big releases. So it was my job to really make sure that big beat releases stood out. And it was just a great experience. I was there for 5 years and, you know, traveled all over, met all the buyers, you know, from, you know, Hot Topic to Warehouse at Violet Brown, who was, you know, the buyer responsible for so many big hip hop releases. Yep. So I made so many great relationships at distribution, at retail, within Atlantic. Okay. So now what happens is Atlantic buys the rest of Big Beat, right? Right. And they want to kind of merge Big Beat into Atlantic. And
this is so prophetic.
Yeah. So now I would be part of the Atlantic situation. Now, during this time, as a side note, I'm a frustrated A&R person, right? Because in my heart of hearts, I really wanted to be A&R, right? Because and Craig was great because he would let me sign things. You know, he's like, hey, I found something buzzing, sign it, you know, which was amazing. He was like, bring me something big. I go to NARM one year, National Association of Retail Merchants, whatever, and I see Master P and his son, Romeo. I don't know if you know Master P. Master P is like, you know, he was huge. He was on No Limit Records, sold millions of records, right? You'll have to look at Master P. Anyway, he, so I brought Master P to Craig, you know, this is it. This is it, you know, and the deal did not happen for some reason. I don't know why. And then Master P did a deal with No Limit, and the rest is history. You can look up his history, millions and millions of records, like just huge success. So anyway, you know, with Atlantic, you know, I said to Craig, I said, listen, I'll stay at Atlantic, but I want to incorporate some A&R. You know, I want to be able to sign bands. Like that is my passion. I'll do the sales thing. I love it, but I really want that. And that really wasn't kind of what, you know, like the big structure wanted. He was, you know, so then I get a call from Eddie O'Loughlin. Eddie O'Loughlin says, hey, Michael, you know, I have a deal. My next Plateau Records has a deal with Roadrunner Records. I don't know. Did you know this?
Yeah, and he was brought in for a while. Yeah, it was a year, I think.
Case was smart. He's like, hey, let's, whatever works. You know, it's like, so he did a deal with Eddie O'Loughlin and Next Plateau Records.
Now we're sort of early to mid-90s, aren't we?
Yes, that was probably like, I don't know when they did the deal, right? But Eddie probably called me, I guess it was 96 because I started at Roadrunner at 97, right? So
Yeah.
it was around that. So Eddie O'Loughlin called me. He knew I was doing my thing, and he goes, "Hey, Michael, I'm having trouble with this one group on the West Coast. We're getting airplay, and we're not seeing sound scans." So, I have a good relationship with Eddie over the years, and I'll help anybody out. I'm like, no problem. Let me make some calls because I'm still at Big Beat. We're still hot, and buyers are taking my calls, and so I called up Violet Brown because she was buying for the warehouse chain, and I said, Violet, next plateau, the singles happening with this group, how's it doing for you? She goes, I don't even carry this record. It was a cassette. He goes, I'm not carrying the cassette single. I'm like, oh, all right, no wonder, right? So I called up Eddie O'Loughlin and said, hey, your problem is the biggest chain in the West Coast, who you're getting airplay, whatever, they're not carrying it. Well, he was livid, right? Yep. At the time, the head of sales for Roadrunner was Peter Mullen, okay? Very nice. I didn't know him that well, whatever. I'm not blaming anything on him, right? But the bottom line is, so Eddie O'Loughlin, he must have brought it to Case's attention and must have been like, look, I'm not getting any support on my next plateau releases. What can we do? This and that. I love this guy, Michael Canter. I don't know what your situation is with the sales, whatever, but would you consider? That's what I think went down, whatever. Because the next thing you know, Eddie calls me and he's like, hey, would you sit down with Case Wessels because I'd love to, recommend you for like a head of sales because they're changing their position. Right. So I guess behind the scenes, actually, I think on his own, Peter Mullen was taking a job somewhere else. I think on his own, and I guess they were looking maybe for a replacement. So it was right around the time where it was just perfect timing because I had to decide: am I going to go to Atlantic and do sales there, or do I take this opportunity? And
is the A&R functionality that you're trying to adopt to Atlantic, is that fizzling out or something, or is that because? Yeah,
exactly. Like that. Well, so what had happened was I basically, I liked what Case was saying. I knew Roadrunner. I knew of Roadrunner. I really didn't know all the bands. I didn't know all the bands. This was like 97 and this 96. But I was like, you know what? I know hip hop and R&B. Like, I want to know this rock stuff. Like, this would be also great to know, and it's a great record. I mean, a great record label. And I know what Case is, trying to achieve. And this sounds like a great opportunity. So I accepted the gig. And, I went back to tell Craig whatever, and Craig's like, listen, I'm trying to get this situation together where, if you stay, I'll put you at ADA Distribution, right, which was another distribution company, and you'll be like the Alan Becker, which you interviewed. You'll be like the Alan Becker. You'll be like the Alan Becker of ADA, which means, you'll bring in hip hop labels, you'll bring in groups or rock labels. Like, you'll be that arm for Warner's.
People don't know that the world revolves around Alan Becker. People don't know this. Exactly. People need to know this.
Exactly.
So,
I'm like, and tell me if I'm giving you too much detail on all this stuff.
I love this. This is like, it's dangerous territory because we could go off for hours, which I fucking love. Yeah, I love it.
I love this too, because like I want my kids to know like the story, and I want this to last forever. So
I'll send you a copy. It's cool.
All right. Anyway, so anyway, I was like, great, because I like that situation. I was like, you know what? If you could pull that together, I'm in, because that's my passion. That's it. Whatever. So he couldn't. I had this offer on the table. I already accepted it with Roadrunner, and I'm just like, you know what? I think I want to change anyway. So, I changed. I went over to Roadrunner.
So let's pause there, because there's a few things I want to run through, and I'm going to try and deal with it chronologically. I think I've touched on this a few times. SoundScan, massive fucking deal. On the Roadrunner side, SoundScan's impact was people couldn't fake anymore. There was no way you could fudge the numbers. There were other ways you could do it. Like, you could have a promo CD with a purchase that could get scanned for like $2. So you'd scan lows, but you'd make no revenue and things like that. But what was that like for Atlantic? Was there any was it all just, I'm trying to understand, because I've done everything from a Roadrunner perspective for 2 years. And I'm trying to think, what's the hip hop experience of SoundScan? Is it the same? Is it just like CDs are coming out, they're cheaper than cassettes, this is a boom period? or am I mistaken?
Well, we knew, so with the hip hop and big beat, whatever, like we knew the weighted scan stores. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the indies had different, weight. So meaning there were, because if there weren't a lot of stores or chains in that area, then an independent record store would carry more weight. Meaning, for every record that was scanned, it might count as 5 units, or it might count.
Oh my God! I'm gonna lower the desk. This is brilliant. Right. So you're telling me that based on like regional impact and basically local markets, there were some stores which would just count as 5 because they're so important to buttfuck nowhere.
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. So, if you were
you made me sit down.
If you were a smart salesperson, like you kind of knew who these stores were, and we treated them very well, right? And we got that was important as our base to really.
Who decides that though? Who decides bloody Circuit City Mini or whatever is going to be?
I mean, listen, I'm not going to blame anybody but myself, right? And we're not talking about the Circuit Cities or the Music Lands.
I don't know why.
This is like the the independents, right? And
Tim's Records, yeah.
We again we needed a base, we needed scans, anything that would really help us.
But when I'm not asking you to pull the rug on this corrupt system from the early 90s, but who would decide this has more value? Because the implications of SoundScan were massive because it gave grunge viability. There's a whole thing that happens in this little window of time which completely changes the course of how the press and the consumer would interact with music. So I'm blown away by this idea.
Yeah. I mean, who decides on it? It's just, not a higher up or anything. I mean, obviously it's it's part of the plan. It's just part of the plan. It's just kind of, common knowledge. Like if we need to help out and really get those scans,
I guess it's kind of gerrymandering for consumer retail music. I guess it's kind of it's democracy for the flyover states as well, isn't it? Because that's where you're not going to see the bigger numbers. Presumably, because that's not where the cultural hubs are.
Yeah. It was just listen, it was a way to help out. It was just
right.
Okay. And it worked. And listen, we supported indie retail, right? So if we had to send them a few extra records, it worked, I
think this bleeds into
it wasn't massive corruption, you know what I'm saying?
No, I'm sure it wasn't, but it's interesting because it's just something that wasn't available before. One thing I was to put this in a Roadrunner context. One thing I heard was Doug Keogh's Friday night routine. It wasn't go down to the Old Bar or whatever it's called. He'd go down to IRD. He'd go down to Alan Becker's with a fucking clipboard and match up their reports to what they had in stock. So he'd be doing it all manually. And so SoundScan comes in and he doesn't need to do that anymore. It just changes the whole game. So it's just interesting when there's a democratization of reporting. I like the idea of that kind of innovation.
Yeah. I mean, listen, honestly, on the Roadrunner side, I don't recall us really messing with that. You'd have to go back to Austin and ask him that because he was dealing with more of the indie retails and stuff like that. I think
it was a different game then as well.
It was a different game, and also we on the hip hop side and R&B, we were dealing with a lot of singles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was really a way of helping us get more radio, right? Because we were dealing with singles. Roadrunner was an album game, so we didn't really. It wasn't any of that really going on,
Right. Okay. Now I'm going to ask a very difficult question because I think this is important as well. Rock and metal are album oriented. I mean, we could have a conversation about this rise of the EP that's happened in the last sort of 5-ish years. What are the margins on a single versus an album?
I mean, it's an album game, right? That's why. Listen, I don't recall us really at Roadrunner. We wouldn't put out, singles, whatever. But the margins were, we had cassette singles, you know, which maybe retail would sell for $1.99, and we would sell it to retail for, you know, 69 cents, you know, or a 12-inch, you know, they would sell for, I don't know, $3.99. We'd sell it to them for, you know, $1.25 or $1.50. And then, you know, albums, you know, that's where the margins are really great, you know, because depending on, you know, which genre, you know, we're talking about, but, you know, we could make $5 or $6, you know what I mean, as opposed to $1 or $2, you know.
I think it depends on the demographic as well. Let's say demographic, the audience itself, because like the metal audience and the rock audience is at least has a perception to be a return audience. So at least like as a label, you're guaranteeing yourself a certain bit of income, whereas like rap and hip hop is more of a it's
that's why, you know, and that's why if you're talking digital or physical, like if you're talking digital, right? So, you know, now the digital single comes out on iTunes, right? And they're only paying the labels like a 30%, you know, 30% or whatever. And the, you know, albums in general, right, used to only have 1 or 2 singles on it, right? So now all of a sudden it's like they're not buying the Engler, they're not downloading or buying the album, they're just getting the 1 or 2 singles, right? That's why it's interesting. Like Kid Rock on the rock side, he was one of the last holdouts. Like he was, you know what, I'm not putting my stuff up digitally, you know, like, and I think Taylor Swift, same thing. They were both holdouts. Like, no way, I'm not putting my stuff up digitally, forcing people to buy the albums, you know? So, you know, album, better margin. That's how record companies make their money.
I love this shit.
Hey, before I forget, I got to tell you a little side note, which I forgot, which you'll love. I'm working at Pearl Music. I'm producing some hip hop, whatever. My friend Mitch Dudley, who I'm working with, and he's a hip hop artist as well. And he's like, come on, let's go. He had like he had a couple big hits back in the day. So I'm like, Mitch, like, let's do more hits with you, whatever. He goes, all right, great. I found a studio in Brooklyn. It's only like $20 an hour. I'm like, great. So we go in the studio. It's this white dude with long hair. He's got like a pit bull or like a really big dog, like in the basement or like we're like scared of this dog. He's got like a studio, whatever. And, you know, we record the album and this and that. And we saw different things on the wall, whatever. So it's funny because that was Josh Silver from Typo Negative, right? I mean, I had no concept who Typo Negative was or whatever, but here we are, right? No clue, but several years later, I'm selling Typo Negative. And actually, like, we were in Josh's home in his studio, like recording this hip hop. You know?
That's crazy. I love it. Now, another thing I want to touch on after SoundScan and CD and shit. What was your first impression of Case? This enigmatic sort of Dutch.
It's very serious, you know, very sharp. You know, just smart guy asking the right questions. You know, how can we win? You know, what's our game plan? How can you help us? What do we need to do?
Interesting. So let me try and I'm going to pitch you what my research says is where Case is at in terms of his intentions with Roadrunner at this period. So we're in 97. We've had our early 90s, which is thrash and death metal, successful, but there's a ceiling to that market. We'll move out, and in Europe, we've got some massive success in Gabba, and we're trying to move a bit further out into sort of the grunge and rock world, just trying to diversify the palette a lot. So 97, I don't know if it's the year, but Roadrunner as an indie function starts moving into like a major structure. So Derek Shulman's brought in, Dave Loncast brought in, you're brought in from the major side of life. In Europe, Jimmy Devlin's in the UK office, and also the structure completely changes because they wanted to take it more seriously and wanted to take this mission of like, because it wasn't, Case didn't want to be a metal label, he wanted to be a label, a really good label, and he wanted to build it as a major label almost. So when he asks questions like, what's the game plan and what do we need to do to win? Can you remember what your response was?
Well, first of all, before I came in on the sales side of things, Roadrunner was already set up to succeed, right? I was actually shocked and surprised because here I am coming from Big Beat, we'd regionals. Roadrunner, Big Beat didn't have their own regionals. We tapped into Atlantic's regionals. Roadrunner had their own regionals. And I'm just like, wow, you got, the structure was there. So you had, the head of sales, you had, second in command dealing with the street and analytics and everything else. Right at the time, it was Bob Johnson, right? Who's a very successful manager with Corey Brennan now. Bob Johnson is like the Mark Shapiro, the Austin Stevens, like that role. And then we had 4 regionals. So I was like, this is amazing. So really, from my end, I didn't make any changes. Yes, maybe I brought new blood in and new relationships. And, we just really needed the product,
Right.
So, to really answer that, like we were really already set up, but that was just Case's mindset. Like, just, he wasn't like, Michael, what do we need to do to win or this and that or whatever. It was just, that was really just more of his mindset. Right. So we were already set up in sales. Now he's got this major label guy, like I'm going to set the world on fire, whatever. And Jonas was amazing. He was I guess the GM at the time. And Jonas, he previously was a sales guy. So we got each other. Right. And then I guess when Case brought in Dave Lonco, that was really the one that, all right, so he obviously must want to go to get to that next level. He was thinking, all right, we got to get radio, we got to get this person. And that was Lonco, right? And then taking a step further, and I can't remember what years Lonco came in, but it was the same year, the next year, and when Derek Schulman came in. But of course, Derek Schulman with his, credibility and his signings back, was like, all right, this is what we need. I'm sure Case like, this is what we need to get to the next level. Now we just need the signings.
What did Derek bring to the table then? I don't know a lot about Derek.
I think he really brought credibility and relationships that he's had, right? He's been obviously a superstar himself. He's been in the business for so long. He had a ton of relationships and the credibility, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know what he did day to day, right? But just having his presence meant a lot to the label.
Yeah.
And I'm sure to the community in the world, it's like, oh, they brought Derek Schulman in. All right, what's Roadrunner doing next? So
because his background was Electra, wasn't it?
Yes.
Bon Jovi, Pantera.
Signings. Yes.
What was Electra, Pantera? Either way, yeah.
Sure.
So what was the main, let's say it's like week 1, week 2, what are you identifying as like, oh, this isn't like Big Beat? Was there anything that was like the core differences of?
I came in, we were at Prince Street at the time, and like the sales staff, we were all in one office pretty much. I had Bob Johnson there, Mike, Tom Ty was the New York regional, and I honestly was a little nervous, right? Because I really didn't know the product, right? It helped me. Listen, I'm good in sales. I always thought I was good in sales with Big Beat. Like I'm like a pop and R&B hip hop guy. Like, and I think I know hits, but more in like the pop hip hop, so like, and it helps to sell what you're really passionate about. Right. Yeah. So I come in, I don't know if the first record was Machine Head or Fear Factory, one of those, whatever. And I'm a little nervous because I don't know this style of music. I don't know the setup. I'm like, oh my God, what is the staff thinking? Because, big label guy coming in. But I got to tell you, everybody, they were very, my team, my sales team and the label, very respectful to me, very, they were like, here, this is what we normally do. We're here to support you. And then, then for me, it was just learning a new distribution company.
Right.
Okay. Because I was dealing on the Big Beat side. I was dealing with, I think, both ADA, which their independent arm, and then WIA, the major label arm. So I knew distribution. It was just learning another distribution company, which I was psyched about because I'm like, all right, I want to know everything. I want to know all distribution companies, how everything works. So I had really good credibility coming in, especially from the distribution arm, because Mike Canter from Atlanta, so right away I got their respect, which was great. And then, you know, a lot of support from my staff. And then it's just a matter of what was great, because at the time we were a big fish in, you know, a smaller pond with Red Distribution. So they really were hot on Roadrunner. Like,
oh God, yeah.
You know, whether it was a low level band or a bigger band, you know, it was just like, they took us very serious. We laid out the goals, you know, we worked on the game plan, and we were off to the races. So we were all good, you know, what I traveled, you know, the first month, whatever, I met all the regionals, stopped at all the Red Distribution, you know, offices, and we were just off to the races, you know. And it was funny, and I, you know, during that time, like before Nickelback hit, whatever, I don't know what period. So, you know, you had Wind Up Records, right? Wind Up Records had Creed. Yeah. Right? Creed was a huge superstar band. And I think, I don't know if they had Three Doors Down or somebody had Three Doors Down. And so like, that's why like before Nickelback broke, you know, you had those big bands. And I remember Jonas, you know, coming to me and saying, man, why not us? Like, this was, I think it was even before Nickelback was signed. It's like, why can't we get one like that? Like, why not us? You know? So yeah, that was like, you know, the beginning stages. I came in 97, you know, we did our rock releases. It was great. I think 98, maybe that's when, you know, Slipknot, you know, first came out.
I was going to ask you, obviously this is something you will eventually learn because you're now in with the troops, but from someone who has been intimate with the hip hop side and the pop side, and then come over to the rock side, when obviously everything's sort of built on buzz, is there a difference between a rock buzz and a pop buzz? Or is it kind of the same vibe?
It's kind of the same vibe.
Yeah.
You know, you just, you know, you feel it, your regionals feel it. You feel it from the streets, right? So Big Beat, you know, was really like, it was a street label, had that street cred. Roadrunner, same thing. Street had that street cred, you know.
Right.
Granted, even though we didn't have big radio records, you know, we had college radio, maybe active rock on some of the ones, but you know, the buzz is kind of the same.
It's universal.
Yeah,
I guess it's the universe. Because I bet it's different for each artist. Not like a universal. Oh, this is popping. It popped last week with this band. It pops next week with the other one. Yeah. Speaking to the fact that you didn't know the product at this point, Slipknot are signed in 98. So this is within 12 months, perhaps, of you starting there. What's your initial impression? Because if you think, I don't really know the product in 97, in 98, the product that is given to you is fucking 9 dudes in masks throwing up everywhere and spreading rumors about crows and stuff.
Yeah. So, and again, whether I knew of the product or not, right? I was still full on, you know, we're still doing our thing, you know what I mean? Yeah,
sure.
And in selling it, right, we had such a great story with each record, so it was easy to kind of sell distribution and to sell retail. So Slipknot comes along and I'm like, wow, I knew right away it was something different. And I'm just like, you know, and I'm not saying I'm like this huge heavy metal fan, whatever, but I was like, this, you just knew it was universal. It was like, they're different. The music is different. Like this, I felt it was going to be big. And we saw them play the side stage of Ozfest, you know, that year. And they had such a buzz. Like, I mean, more people than one of the main stages. Like, you just felt it, you knew. And that's how we set it up. And like I said, to ship 30,000 as opposed to like 8 to 12 as a baby band, you just knew this was going to happen. You know what I mean? And, you know, this was a band, like, it was worth a trip going to Minneapolis to meet with Best Buy. Like, it was setting up just so well, right? The marketing, everything. So I knew right away, I was excited. The whole label was excited.
As a consumer, like, you go into school, I'm sure I'm my age. You go into school and they'd be like, "Oh, these fucking guys throwing up on each other." It's all this is how you sort of like get the buzz. It's all like secondhand stories. It's all these rumors. That's kind of how it happened. They all wear masks. It's no one knows who they are and all this sort of stuff. So when you're going out to professional business people and they've heard the same stuff, Is there any kind of like, do you ever have to bridge any gaps there? Or do you just come out and straight go, it's a buzz. Fuck the fact that you hear these rumors about them throwing up on stage or whatever the fuck it's going to be. And there was a catalog of Slipknot rumors like in the early days before you realized they were just normal people. But was there ever like any professional sort of like bridge building that you had to do to make sure that, all right, Best Buy should, invest in this brand on the basis that it's definitely going to sell?
It was just, listen, they were treated as listen, there's bands get signed different levels of priority, determined on buzz, what our expectations are. Slipknot, we all knew right away. Most of the buyers, they knew the brand. Again, it's like, right. Oh, it's another Roadrunner release. And but this is something different. Like this, this is Ozfest. This is, they wear a mask. It's not a gimmick. Let the music speak. Like this is going to be big. And listen, at the time, right, it's, maybe the Walmart buyer was a little bit more corporate. The Target buyer was a little bit more corporate. But we weren't selling any of our music to Walmart or Target at the time, right?
Right.
The Best Buy buyer, most of these buyers like had a pulse on what was going on.
Right. Okay.
And at the time, Best Buy was really into music and really into metal, whether it was a lost leader for them to get people in the stores or not. But they, the buyers really got it. The buyer at Hot Topic, like this was there. This was, what was going to get people inside. And so it really was not difficult. There were no challenges at the time with Slipknot.
Right. Perfect.
I mean, the challenge was, listen, you ship 30, I forget what we scanned. I don't know, maybe it was 5,000 or 6,000, which would have been great. Now it's like, all right, we got to ship more out there. Let's get more out there, or, as a salesperson, it's always like, why didn't you ship more then? Or, so always the pressure. But Slipknot was just, we all knew.
What's the feeling at the top level of the business then? Because Case had successes like that, scaled down in the 70s when he was part of the major label system, right? Was it, I mean, I've kind of got a blind spot for this period because you got Slipknot and then you've got Nickelback and then you've got Silver Side Up, which is just Silver Side Up and Iowa coming out within 2 weeks of each other, which is just like, ugh. And in my head, there must have been a point where they've just gone, this is not sustainable mentally. We can't really be thinking about this straight because it's too successful. Is there any point where it's just like people are losing their shit? Or do you think it was because of the system they'd put into place and the structure they put into place, everything was kind of managed not with an overly optimistic view of things, but they kept it realistic, even though it was like a runaway success. I do this thing where I fucking ramble because I'm trying to compete with my thoughts while I'm asking you a question. But you get my idea. This shit blows up, and in my head, again, I'm sat over in my school going, oh, that's interesting. But if you're working it, you must go, fuck me. This is what we've been working for 20 fucking years. It must be mad, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, leading up to the success, it was, business as usual. This is what we're striving for. Everything is in place, right? Like all the tools are there, all the systems are there. We just need to feed it. And if we're lucky enough to get a band that clicks and we get a hit, that's a beautiful thing, right? Once you get the hit, right, then all of a sudden, maybe the unrealistic expectations come because it's like, all right, we sold 2 million on this Nickelback, or we sold 2 million on this Slipknot. Well, we got to ship 5 million, like, because then it becomes like, oh my gosh, it's like, that's when it goes to another level. Because everybody's giddy, everybody's like, woo, we are amazing. We got to ship more.
Giddy's the word.
We got to do the numbers. You know what I mean? It's all about the numbers. What are we going to do next? Then it gets a little crazy. You know what I mean? So, but it was such a great ride, like especially leading up to those two bands was such a great ride. And then afterwards was just amazing, because Roadrunner became such a major label, and attracting other bands, and you realize like it's not that easy, right? There's a lot of luck involved. There's just all the stars aligned, just, it's not one person, I'd love to say, yeah, I came over and you see what happened. Derek Schulman came on board, see what happened.
Yeah.
It was just, it was like Jonas's thing, like, why not us, so a little bit of everything. Look, the talent was there, the passion, and, and we had the bands, we had the goods to do it. So amazing ride.
It's interesting the example you gave there. It's like everyone gets giddy. We should do 5 million next. Because when Bloody Kisses came out and October Rust was being recorded, written, whatever, apparently the band were told that they were expecting 6 million. But it's just, again, but Bloody Kisses was the first goal. So it's kind of like that same kind of giddiness,
Yeah.
So can you tell me about the experience with IDJ, the run up to the deal? Obviously, I'm privy to a lot of information, like the financial difficulty that the label was stressing under. And I'm also privy to the information that the sale happened and then like 6 months later, Silver Side Up happens. So, there's a parallel universe out there where Roadrunner doesn't get sold at all, But what was your experience in this? Was there anxiety? Was it fairly simple on the day-to-day?
So I really didn't know. I wasn't privy to like what was going on, the talks or financial stress or anything like that. I really wasn't privy to that. I just knew, hey, now we're part of IDJ and Universal. And again, I was thrilled, right? Because it was another distribution company for me to figure out,
All right, cool.
More relationships, right?
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough. I always had good credibility. That was important to me in my career, right? So, and there's only really there's a handful of buyers that I was really dealing with, because the roles between myself and, Mark Shapiro or Austin at the time was I was really dealing with the major, chains and one stops and, my number two, whether it's Bob Johnson, Austin or Mark Shapiro, whatever, was really dealing with the indies and those types of buyers. So we all had great relationships with those buyers, which are so key to us. So now we just had to learn a new distribution system, which is just get the relationships with the salespeople and make sure that they know Roadrunner is a priority, right?
Right. Okay.
Because now we're a little fish in a big pond, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we all had to come into play. Luckily enough, they knew Kathy Merritt on the West Coast. She had great credibility. You know, my guy Scott Stiglish in Minneapolis, they knew him. So we had such great staff that they knew my people. It was just we had to figure out who the key players were at distribution and make sure that they were shipping the right amount. They knew our marketing plan, our game plan, and we put pressure on them. Listen, we got to ship this. This is our plan for Nickelback. This is our plan for Slipknot. So to me, exciting time, just learning a new distribution company. So it was good.
It's interesting because the sentiment when I talk about the Universal acquisition is they're only really bothered about Slipknot. In terms of like the day-to-day, you might go to like a quarterly sort of review with IDJ and Universal, but they're not bothering you on the day-to-day at all. It's kind of the same deal. But it's interesting how you're saying there, but for you, it was the different distribution infrastructure meant you had to refamiliarize yourself, and more importantly, you had to build those relationships. So you presumably had to go to Minneapolis and or wherever with a bottle of wine and just go, I'm this guy now. You have to be okay with this because I'm going to be screaming down your neck when Volume 3 or Iowa comes out or something like that,
Because I may have a different perspective from Dave Blanco. I didn't listen to his podcast with you. Now, because I think probably like getting a radio band like a Nickelback, I think maybe he was able to tap into maybe their staff, which was very, very important. I don't know, he could probably say something to that. But for the sales side of things, from my world, it was nothing but positivity. Universal is such a strong distributor, and just tapping into, the ways of how they do business.
And Leo Cohen, who was obviously there at the time, is kind of more your ilk, isn't he? From
yeah. He wanted to win. He was a hip hop guy. He was thrilled with Roadrunner. I remember him coming into our offices when the deal was announced. He wanted to win. And, it's like all the stars aligned. It's just amazing, right? I mean, how well did he look? He put this deal together, and then all of a sudden, you got two of the biggest bands. Listen, we can all take credit for it.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear about Def City?
I don't think he did. I don't think
he would go slapped you with some paperwork, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what? I tell you about this then, because I asked Austin like, what should I ask Michael tomorrow? And he said, ask about Case coming up to your office window with a Sharpie.
Yeah, I mean, I forget which Nickelback record it was, but yeah, he just comes by. I think he put like 4 million on the wall when maybe we were at 2 million, and like I said, when success started happening, he put more pressure on to do it. But I'll touch upon some interesting things that would be of interest to you.
Oh, totally.
So, Slipknot. So when Nickelback really took off, right? A really good partner was Walmart, right? Because it's so funny. I was talking to the buyer this morning before, because I'm still really good friends with him, and there were such great days, right? When Nickelback Silver Side Up was on fire. Jonas would send me to Walmart, who bought records through Anderson Merch. Walmart didn't buy music directly. And, I would come back with a 500,000 piece order, like 500,000, right? So yeah, the buyer I was talking to this morning about like sales and stuff like that. He said he must have bought about 8 million Nickelback records, right? So this guy Norman Hurd, probably I felt was the most underrated person in the music business, and also he had a really good ear too. So, Walmart, Target, now all of a sudden, like they were like selling a ton of Nickelback, right? So it was really, really interesting. So now Slipknot, right? We want Slipknot to go to that next level with those kind of numbers. And listen, Slipknot platinum band, but how can we get them even bigger? So now it's like, well, let's have them do a clean version and get it into Walmart. I'm like, you guys are crazy. How are we going to clean up, Slipknot? Because Walmart would take in clean versions of some of the harder edged music. So we made a clean version of the Slipknot self-titled. I think we made a clean version of Iowa. And that's why when I was talking to the buyer this morning, I was like, what kind of units did you sell in these clean versions? And, he said combined, like he did like over 300,000 units, which is pretty amazing.
How do you tidy up people equal shit though?
I don't know, man. I don't know. So that's why like Nickelback really went beyond Slipknot in sales, because it was just more, accessible.
Sure.
Right. Because, whether it was radio, but even in the stores, because Walmart, Walmart was a lot of great markets where Slipknot fans were, and they didn't want the clean version. They wanted the dirty version, and they couldn't buy it there, So that was interesting.
Is that still the case? Will some of the big retailers still not buy any dirt stuff? I imagine I can only picture because there's an ecosystem around Slipknot, and I was speaking to Felix Sebaceous from Blue Grape, and he was like, we put fucking Slipknot t-shirts in Macy's, so there's a whole thing about this band, and I'm just thinking that they must have been, I'm not necessarily them, but at some point, one of those bigger brands must have relented and just gone, just fucking bring it in. But you got to bring in the jumpsuits as well, the prison jumpsuits as well. There've got to be something that would relent, but apparently not.
It's so interesting because there is a Nickelback record that's coming out now. Okay, they're through BMG, and my guy at Anderson Walmart, I was like, so what are you bringing in on that? And he's like, probably 9. So when I think of Nickelback, whatever, I'm like, oh wow, like 90,000, whatever. He goes, no, 9,000 combined. I'm like, oh, okay. So they have like a CD, they have a special package CD, and then there's vinyl, right? Just to show you, I mean, it's, how the market has changed.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. Moving forward then, Is there anything else about this period we should focus on? I haven't got any specific questions because this is where people usually jump in and go, let me tell you about the time I played golf with Leo, or let me tell you about this bus we took to a Slipknot gig before recession, where dollars actually were you could actually buy things.
So yeah. So let me just tell you. So a little bit I forgot. So on the Roadrunner period, when I come in, right, there's Next Plateau, right? That was the main reason why I came in, and there were still releases coming out, whatever. And Next Plateau wasn't having success. You know, they had their own little staff, they had their own little floor within our building. I wasn't part of that. I was part of like Roadrunner, whatever. And I just remember, you know, Case was just like, you know, definitely concerned about, hey, they're not getting traction. Like, you know, are they going to have success? So that kind of fell to the wayside. Maybe Case said, listen, it's not working out. Like they ended their, you know, relationship. I, you know, still had hip hop and R&B in my blood, right? And I knew of this label called Power Records that was hot, you know, in down south. Okay. And I was like, Case, there's this urban hip hop label that I think could be good. Or you still want to, you know, mess around in that genre, whatever, because I think you should meet up with this guy, Leroy McMahon. You know, he had a big record called the Da Dip, right? Da Dip, like it was, you know, multi-platinum back in the day, whatever. So he meets with them, they hit it off, and he does this deal with them. And I'm like, this is great. You know, I went with him to Atlanta to do the deal, whatever. And it's so funny. I was just thinking about it because I think like I'm riding, I don't know, when we were riding to the airport or something, I might have even asked Case. I was like, so Case, you know, on this deal, you know, do you think I can get any points on it? You know, I was like, hey, I am kind of an A&R function, whatever. And Case was like, I don't want to talk about that now. I'm like, all right.
That's
never
amazing.
happened. But anyway, so the first release from Power Records was called Jake the Flake. Right. So I was excited. Right now it's like, all right, this is my genre. I know this. You know, Case let me bring in a staff, this guy, Jim Mahoney, right? Because Jim Mahoney, who now runs Merlin. Right? Jim used to work at Profile, used to work at Pearl Music, also the hip hop king, like marketing, like genius, right? So I'm like, Mahoney, I got this opportunity. You should come to Roadrunner. You'll oversee the whole urban side of things. You could oversee Power. You know, we could sign some urban records and maybe get this thing going. Case is great, and you should do it. So they hired Jim, which was great. They loved him. Powers to Be loved him. And then we have this Jake the Flake record. You know, I traveled around to sell it. We're shipping 50,000 units. Like that's a lot, 50,000. And I'm like, oh my God, we better, you know, because again, it's my credibility from the Big Beat days, and you know, and I know all the buyers. I'm like,
it's still relatively early for you as well in Roadrunner.
Yeah. So, oh man, I think we sound scanned 1,000 pieces the first week. Now,
oh no,
that's horrible.
Yeah,
that is horrible. To ship 50,000 units and to scan 1,000, right? Because the head of Power, like he said, all these things were happening, buzz, this, that, and the other thing, and in the end, nothing really was true. Nothing happened, and I was like embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, this is. I mean, I'm so happy they didn't like terminate me over that, whatever, because it was just like, well, we shipped a lot of units, but I know a lot are going to come back. And yeah, Jake the Flake was kind of, I think, the death of Power Records. Maybe we put out maybe 2 or 3 more records, and that ended. And Jim Mahoney was amazing, but there wasn't a need for him, so he went on to do just more amazing things, and now he's running you know, Merlin, and we have, you know, laughs over it. But other than that, during that period, just the, you know, great time with the staff, great period. We're selling a ton of records, and all good.
On reflection, was that kind of reach into that territory, was it silly? Was it misguided? Or
no, because listen, ultimately it was Case's decision, And, he was always into trying different things. And he's like, listen, you know what? Maybe it'll work. He wanted to win. He wanted to win, and he was always into trying different things.
Right.
And I'm not sorry that I hooked him up with that relationship. Other than that, it was, was his decision, and it could have been the biggest success. It didn't happen. It was fine. Let's focus on what we do best. And that's
right. Yeah. Monty wanted to know if having an office next to him was annoying because he just kept blasting out music, obviously.
No, that was awesome. That was like, Monty was awesome, and I was thrilled to have him next door to me, and love the guy.
How do you feel about the Warner acquisition then? I know a similar question to the IDJ one, but we're aware that the Warner acquisition was kind of a different beast.
So Warner's was cool. So you got to remember, so I started with Craig Kalman, right?
Of course, yeah.
Now Craig Kalman is like the man, running the show, right? So in a way, I was happy to be back home. I didn't interact with him at all. We were friends, whatever. But I was like, oh man, it's like, part of me is like, I wonder how he really thinks of me, because I did leave that situation, right?
Yeah.
And but Warner's, I knew a lot of the people. It was easy for me because a lot of the people that I started with when I was at Big Beat, they were still there. So it was very easy for me.
Sure.
And we had great product. So it was it was just a very, very smooth, transition,
Yeah. No, fair enough. Closing out then, how did your relationship with Roadrunner end? Did you leave? I don't know the details of this, but
so
we can cut wherever we want to cut.
Yeah. So, it was announced that Warner had bought, fully owned, Roadrunner.
2010, yeah.
All this. And then we kind of saw little by little, they were, they wanted to kind of merge and, kind of have a limited staff, or takes, they grab some of the staff. So I kind of felt the writing was on the wall with me.
Right.
And probably the sure sign of it was I was friends with Jonas, outside of work, we kids the same age, still
Right.
busy, whatever. But it's the last 2 weeks, he didn't look at me or talk to me. So it was oh man, I think he's breaking up with me. This is bad, it was bad. In hindsight, and we talk every once in a while, whatever. And he's just he tells me, he goes, he knew it, right? He couldn't face me. He just, he felt bad. But I was just oh no, he's not looking at me. He's not talking to me. I'm like, this can't be good, But
was this straight away? Was this 2010, 2011 time then?
Yeah, it was 2010, 2011. Yeah.
Right. So you didn't go out in what's been referred to as the Red Wedding?
No.
Okay. The Red Wedding is April 2012, when just the axe drops and there's all the international offices shut. And
I think I was I was 2011. Yeah, I was
right. Okay.
All
right.
And it was definitely a bummer, because if there were different circumstances, I really think we could all still be there today.
Sure.
What I mean? Because we had such a strong brand, and this is what happens with the major label world, right? They want the roster, they'll maybe cherry pick, and there still is a Roadrunner label, I guess, today, right? I mean, I don't know. It's maybe there's 1 or 2 people left. I mean,
no, I think there's a couple of people left. I think, but it's not of the Monty era.
Yeah.
It's people who joined in 2009 or something might still be there. It's that kind of era. Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Monty, how Monty didn't survive is beyond me. You know what I mean? Because guy's a genius, signs so many bands. I mean, just that kind of blows my mind.
Let's play dirty for a second then, and then talk about the two sort of like bigger runs of artists. So Monty's in the post 2000s era. He's still innovating like underground metal. Like he signs Trivium, he signs a shit ton in this. I don't know who the fuck is he signing in latter era Roadrunner. He signs loads, but for some reason I'm drawing a blank. Bear with it. I've did a massive Google Sheets on this, going from 1980 all the way through to 2012, and it's literally about 300 row 300. No, I'm wrong. It's 500 releases. So who is he signing? Like sort of 20? Yeah. So he's got like Wednesday 13, of course, Devil Driver. He's doing all sorts. He didn't get. Did he? No, he wasn't El Nino. That was Mike Gitter. Mm-hmm. There's Coma. He didn't do Dresden Dolls. But my point being, you got all this underground stuff that Monty's doing, but then like Ron Berman's on the other side, and he's kind of bringing in this more Americana sound, like this more sort of traditional rock sound with like Airborne and Blackstone Cherry and things like that. As a sales guy, what was the better bet, right? Because in my head, I would have thought like the Blackstone Cherries and Airbornes of the world would have performed really well.
Yeah,
it's less of a risk.
Yeah, that's why we got spoiled, right? And I love Ron Berman and I love Monty, but again, Monty Connor, he was dealing more with the bass, right? And I would think you want to sign, you want to still have those foundational artists that are gonna deal with the brand, and along the way you'll get a Slipknot out of it, which is amazing. Ron Berman struck gold with Nickelback, struck gold, right? Mm-hmm. Then behind that, we had some success with Theory of a Dead Man
and Theory, yes.
Blackstone Cherry. But we kind of all learned, or maybe Case learned, or as a label, like a Nickelback comes along every once in a while, you know what I mean? And these other bands, you could dump a lot of money into radio and marketing, and they may not happen, you know what I mean? So I think for longevity, I think Monty's that's the bet, I mean, listen, they both didn't survive after Roadrunner.
Oh,
they both have great jobs where they are now. The great gigs, but they didn't survive into the Atlantic system. It's
interesting because maybe like, even though we're comparing apples and oranges, it's not a fair thing. But if I'm thinking from a sales perspective, I would have gone, all right, Blackstone Cherry is going to sell more, but Monty might be putting out 3 or 4 a year, and you might strike gold on one of them. And it's kind of like the risk tolerance is kind of different, and the accessibility is really different. But the risk threshold is like up here for a major label, which is why neither of them survived. And it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
For if you're a rock and roll label with credibility like Roadrunner was, that's kind of how you want to hedge your bets.
Yeah.
You're not betting on red and black. You're betting on the thirds of the table. You know what I mean? It's a bit more.
Right.
It's kind of what Case did though. He was about cultivating the artist, and sometimes you've got to take a bit of a low risk, high reward high risk, high reward kind of approach with that. Especially as we enter that era when the deals weren't $5,000 advance anymore. It was much more dynamic.
Yeah.
But how did you find the Roadrunner United album, which is kind of well timed because they're re-releasing that?
Yeah. No, I mean that was great. It was. I remember it was a little bit harder to sell like on the mass level. You know what I mean? Because it was more like a concept album. You know what I mean? So the street accounts, the Hot Topics, like they ate it up. But from the Best Buy, or I remember like the bigger chains, it's kind of like it's how are we really going to sell it? You know what I mean? But it was a great project. It was it was fantastic.
Did you go to the show?
That was great. That was amazing. that was amazing.
There's a free bar.
Roadrunner, and I'm sorry you never experienced a Christmas party or some of these big events, because Roadrunner, did really great events, and it was just really special time.
Have you got any stories that you're willing to lay down your professional credibility on the line for to tell?
not so much stories, but, let me think, but I'll just talk in general because, we didn't touch upon my staff, right? So
Sure.
what Mark Shapiro, when he replaced Bob Johnson, as, my number two, street level marketing guy, dealing with the indie accounts, was just amazing. So my staff, I was so lucky because, listen, you're only as good as your team, and they made me look amazing. With my memory loss or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, Mark was just amazing. And, and I was really surprised when he left, right? He was like, hey, listen, I'm leaving. I think he went to Ferret, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if he went into Good Fight when it turned into Good Fight, but
yeah. And then he's like, listen, but don't worry. I think, you should bring Austin Stevens in, because Austin at the time was the Atlanta regional.
for Red.
Amazing. He gets it, this and that. So we did several interviews, and Austin was, the perfect fit.
Yeah.
So, I was very just lucky that I had a great staff to support me. And, just were so talented, made me look good. And again, we were lucky enough to have, the records that we did.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really have any, crazy stories for you.
The consummate professional.
Or that I'd like to share.
I got so much like off the record stuff. It's a real shame. Like there's literally like hard drives full of shit that can't be seen anywhere.
Well, yeah, here's one. So, through my time at Roadrunner, I was always into, I've always been entrepreneurial, right? Now, I would always go into the recording studio. And this was around the time that Kids Bop was out. You familiar with Kids Bop? Kids Bop is a on Razor and Tie, very successful label. They had basically kids sing hits. You know what I mean? Like
there's a cyclical thing to this, but go for it.
Yeah, so they still come out today. You could find them on iTunes or streaming. Kids will sing hits of today, and parents buy them, right? So I had a great idea, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna bring my friends' kids in the studio, and I'm gonna do kids rapping the hits, right? So I did. So I started a little label called Hip Kitty. Right?
Hip Kitty, that's awesome.
Hip Kitty, Kiddy. Wow. And I came up with a series called Kids Rapping the Hits, and they would do Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice.
In case doesn't know about this while you're doing this on the side.
No. This is no one knows about it. I can't. So the beautiful thing is, the buyer of, Walmart, we're like buds right now. And he's, I'm flying him to Nickelback shows. He's seeing Slipknot. He's buying hundreds of thousands of records. And I'm like, Norman, my wife has this label called Hip Kitty, not me, my wife. And she's got this series called Kids Rapping the Hits. I think it would be great for Walmart. He goes, yeah, I think so too. So I hooked those two up together. So like, he was buying thousands of CDs of like kids rapping the hits,
That's awesome. That's well good.
So, listen, I never did anything that would, that was a conflict of interest. We laugh about Carl. I saw your podcast with Carl Severson.
Yeah.
He reminded me the story of Kill Switch, and I was like, oh yeah. So I gave him advice on how to get it into Hot Topic.
Oh yeah. Oh shit.
So
yeah.
I haven't talked to Carl in like years. I FaceTime texted him yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, Carl, thank you so much for your kind words on your podcast. I just want you to know, Doug Keogh just contacted me. He wants to be reimbursed for the FedEx. Right? Because Doug was always all about the numbers, and just Doug was, and Doug, I don't know if you interviewed him yet, he was the glue to the ship. He was 100% the glue to the ship. But anyway, Carl gave a big. He was like, "Dude, amazing! I love that." You know.
Let me just hang on. Let me just close the loop on the kids bit. So kids singing the hits.
Well, I did do kids singing the hits. I did kids rapping the hits, and I did do kids singing the hits.
Wait, that's the first thing Roadrunner ever put out. Kids doing ABBA.
Really?
I'm not kidding. It's the first thing.
You're
the first thing. It was Roadrunner Productions. It was like before Roadrunner Records. It was Roadrunner Productions, and it dealt in gadgets and shit like that. And one of the things was language tapes, and they also did kids singing the hits. And luckily, someone uploaded this up onto YouTube, so you can see like the first. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. If to be fair, it's Roadrunner Productions, and it's a sub-label called ADAM, which is A''DAM at Amsterdam. But no, that's the first thing that Roadrunner put out.
So I did do kids singing ABBA.
So you closed the loop, man.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, did Case know? Because I thought the end of the story was going to be Case found out and he saw me.
No.
I'll send you a link. It's funny. Well, I say it's funny. It's as quaint as kids singing songs will be, but it's 1981 and it's ABBA in Dutch. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
That's fucking bonkers.
That's amazing.
My last question then is like your best day and your worst day at the label. And you're not allowed to say.
I kind of think honestly, a couple different things, right? Worst day when Mark Shapiro was like, "I'm leaving," because I'm like, "Oh my God, he's my glue." Best day, Austin Stevens comes in. I'm like, "This is perfect." Perfect replacement. He's my guy. I love that. Worst couple weeks was when Jonas didn't talk to me. Best day is when I called Jonas from Texas to tell him, Amarillo, Texas, to tell him I have a $500,000 Nickelback order. So those were great and bad days.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What have we missed? I don't think you tell me.
Just when I left, I did consulting for a while, so my credibility was still amazing. So I went out to consult Indigo Management, which Hailstorm, Shinedown,
Wally Van Middendorf.
Bill McGathy is just an amazing person who runs Indigo Management. And when I left, I was like, what am I going to do? So I called up Derek Schulman. Derek Schulman was running, Frontiers, right? He was like the U.S. Arm of Frontiers. He's like, I want you to come over here and consult, do some consulting. Bill McGathy was consulting. So, I had a pretty good consulting gig happening. Because, hey, it's Michael Canter from Roadrunner Records. You know what I mean? He was behind Slipknot and everything. And it was great. It was a lot of fun,
It's that thing. As soon as he joined Roadrunner, fucking everything.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was fun. And so I did different things like that. But it was funny because, I became really like this rock guy, right? And my personal taste is like, I love Nickelback, because of the songs. Like Chad is an amazing songwriter. So the hits that he wrote were just amazing, like, just bigger than life. And so I kind of like, pop radio, hip hop, that was like my thing. And all of a sudden I left Roadrunner and I'm this like metal rock guy, you know what I mean? So I hate to say it, like I really didn't have it in my blood, except if they were, if Shinedown had like a big hit, or like, if they had hits, I loved it. But like the real hard stuff, whatever, that's not my personal taste. And I kind of wanted to like enjoy what I was doing, like post Roadrunner. So then I kind of stopped doing the consulting thing, whatever. So now I'm still like my main gig now is real estate, sell houses, which is, not as fun as the music business. But I am managing a rap artist which is funny. It came about because I was going on a listing presentation, and I told him I market houses like I market records, and he's like, you got to listen to my son. He's a real great rapper. And I'm like, actually, he is. You know what I mean? So I'm doing that, which is still a lot of fun for me. Actually, you know, I have a distribution deal with Ingrooves, so anytime I want to release music, I could put it through Ingrooves. So I still, the music will always be in my blood. It was such an amazing time. But unfortunately, Roadrunner came to an end.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
Are you in a show house now? Or are you in your house?
I'm in my house.
I'm just looking at the counter. I'm like, I can't see a kettle on there. This must be a show house.
No. Well, listen, I did do a good cleanup for the podcast.
It's a show house, but there's a massive fuck-off piano through there, so it can't be a show unless the owners couldn't get it out.